Welcome to People in Profit. This week we're putting America first and taking a close look at the world's largest economy. Coming up, strong growth and low unemployment. But are all Americans feeling the benefit of a buoyant economy? As President Trump hails the drop in unemployment among black Americans, our correspondents meet people in Washington still struggling to find a job. And we hear from the so-called work campers, people who regularly move thousands of miles across the United States in search of work. Well, the American economy is by all accounts booming. Growth is forecast at over 2.5% this year. Business optimism is at an all-time high and unemployment is at a 17-year low. But the picture is more complicated than that. President Donald Trump has hailed the fact that the jobless rate among black Americans fell to a historic low in December. It's still much higher than the national average, though. Our correspondents Philip Crowther and Sonia Dridi sent this report from Washington.
It's not far from the centre of power, across the river, to one of the poorest parts of Washington, D.C. Anacostia's population is over 90% African American. Unemployment here stands at 14%. It's just 4% in the rest of the country. The job search is tough, and Gionta Morgan has been without employment for 10 years. His many visits to job centres tell him that things are not looking up, despite the president's claims.
It's very hard, real difficult for us as D.C. residents to have a job to just even live. I don't see nothing really that he's doing that's really helping us. If anything, he's doing more harm to us than good.
But the president is right. African-American unemployment was at its lowest point countrywide last December. But that is still twice as high as it is for white Americans. The mayor of Washington, D.C. organized this job fair to get unemployed black residents and business owners in the same room.
And then they make a living for their families by being entrepreneurs.
J.C. Smith is doing just that. His clothing line is a success because it shows African-American pride in a town they also call Chocolate City.
I'm not a big Trump fan, but things are getting better for African-Americans. I think that was the work of our president before Trump, Mr. Obama. But yeah, we're striving and we're doing better. But as a whole, I think African-Americans still have a way to go.
Indeed, the obstacles remain, and 29-year-old Aaron Wilson spells them out.
Especially black African-American males, they tend to judge you or prejudge you before you even sit down and have the interview.
Black employment, in fact, has improved only minimally since 1968. The Economic Policy Institute says America is moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal.
The United States is one of the richest countries in the world, but also one of the most unequal. Kate Moody's here with more. Kate.
Stephen, all around the world, the rich are getting richer and the poor poorer. The gap has become particularly wide in the US, where the top 1% of households hold nearly 40% of the country's wealth. Nearly 90% is in the hands of just 1/5 of Americans. The official poverty rate, meanwhile, stands at almost 13%. There's also a huge disparity when it comes to race and ethnicity, with higher numbers of minorities living under the poverty line. The advocacy group Prosperity Now says that white Americans in the middle class are nearly 8 times better off than black earners, shown here in red, and 10 times more than Latinos, here in yellow. There's also a gender gap. For every dollar earned by a white American male, Asian American women earn 84 cents. White, black, and Hispanic women take home even less. The average American woman earns about 2/3 what a man does. Even geography can play a role. This map shows rates of upward mobility, or how likely it is that a child born into the bottom 1/5 of income earners can move up to the top 20%. In much of the South, the chances are less than 5%. They rise to as much as 17 in parts of the American heartland. The Brookings Institute says that nearly 3/4 of America's GDP is generated in just 53 urban areas, meaning that much of the rest of the country is left behind. Now, the Trump tax overhaul may make these gaps even wider. The cuts are skewed towards high earners, as well as investors and corporations. Overall, the U.S. economy remains strong, and average incomes are higher than other developed economies. But the benefits are not equally distributed, which has led the UN to question whether the American dream has become the American illusion. Stephen?
Kate, thank you very much for that. Now, while unemployment might be low in the US, people are going to greater lengths to find paid work. For many in America, this means moving around as often as every few months to get a job. It's a practice now so well established, the term work camper has even been registered as a trademark. Brian Quinn reports.
A sprawling city of four-wheeled shelters, row upon row of mobile homes in the middle of the Arizona desert. James Kiestoff is among the workers who crisscross America, following the work.
Everything here is basically everything we own. From the red truck to the white trailer, everything we have and need is right there.
An entire life in 35 square meters. He and his wife used to run a supermarket. Forced into bankruptcy, they sold their house and bought this mobile home for $40,000. These are America's accidental nomads. They dreamed of retiring in big houses. Instead, they're on the road. They're called the work campers, people who work while they camp. In winter, most nomadic workers migrate south towards Florida. These temporary residents work full-time for minimum wage, $8.25 per hour.
You learn to live within your means, and when you take this life, that's what you expect.
Itinerant workers have become some of the country's cheapest labor. At this job fair in Arizona, businesses recruit work campers, here for the beet harvest.
The base pay is $13.50 an hour, 12-hour days, 7 days a week.
$2,500 for 2 weeks of work, nearly double the minimum wage.
Their work ethics are great for the most part, most of them. And they're mobile, yeah.
In the Florida trailer park, the nomadic workers have signed a 6-month contract. Then they'll be on the road again.
It's freedom for us to move about wherever we want.
But more than a lifestyle, it's become an economic necessity in a country where, for many, retirement is simply not an option.
Well, let's try to break down some of these issues now with Anton Brender, who's the chief economist at the asset management company Candriam. You've also written a book called The American Economy, A European View. Thank you very much for speaking to us. The US economy is doing well by pretty much all measures. Why then do we see these high levels of poverty in the United States?
It's not only that the US economy is doing well, the US economy is one of the most powerful in the world economy. It's one of the most efficient, it's one of the most innovative. But the paradox is not only that inequalities have risen, inequalities have been there for a while, and that is well known now, they have increased during the last decades. But the real issue is that half of the population standards of living have not improved during almost the last 3 or 4 decades. And this is really something exceptional and paradoxical. On one hand, a very powerful economy, and on the other, an incapacity to produce what we call social progress. And this is really the paradox of the US economy right now.
And what has led to this paradox?
Many things, many things. The US economy has been confronted with the same kind of forces as many other developed economies. That is, technical progress is really a challenge, and opening to foreign trade is also a challenge, but we all try to meet those challenges in different ways. And the US is insisting very much, it's very deeply rooted in the US values, on laissez-faire. And those forces, you have to counter, you have to face, only with laissez-faire is fairly impossible to do. And I believe that the symptoms we see now in the US economy, rising inequalities and this absence of social progress, is really the result of this combination of very strong headwinds, things that destroy jobs, and the incapacity to accompany these forces by public actions that would help society cope with technical progress and with international trade.
Donald Trump has promised since before he was elected to do more to protect Americans and support Americans. Are there policies that he's proposed that could change this?
Well, the policies he's proposing, are not directly, the one at least that he implemented, like the tax reform, will not directly change this. the key thing now he's trying to implement is trade policy. And trade policy is not the proper way, I believe, to counter those forces, because it just means trying to move backward instead of moving forward, but accompanying societies to help it. Accompanying society to help it, meet the challenge by more infrastructure spending, public infrastructure spending.
But he is talking about that as well.
Yeah, but he's not doing it. That's the problem. He's talked a lot, but he's not doing it. And training, vocational training, better education, those are the key things that the state has to provide if you want to help society to cope with international competition, and also to allow people to occupy the better paid jobs that need qualifications.
Can any American president, do you think, achieve that? Is that too big a change?
That's the biggest challenge to the US society, I think, today. It's that on both sides, whether you look at Democrats or Republicans, the idea that laissez-faire is, to some extent, the only policy that should be followed, this very deeply rooted belief in laissez-faire that is very old in the US and very resilient, is really, I believe, a barrier to adjustment to today's challenges of the most developed societies.
OK, Anton Brender, Chief Economist at Candriam, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from us for now. If you'd like to get in touch with your thoughts on any of the stories that we've been covering, you can find us on Facebook at France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at NewStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.